Hello and welcome to the Open Door Philanthropy Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Moss. And with me this week is the chair of my board of directors, Margaret Chapman. She does other things, so we're going to talk about that in a moment. But first, why don't you say hello to everybody, Margaret?
Thank you. I kind of did. So I just interrupted you to say hello to everybody because that's what I'm good at, interrupting you.
Yes, it won't be, I think there will be other interruptions.
Probably.
Today. At some point, you'll probably have to remind me what I'm talking about, mid-sentence.
I usually do. So
there are some birds, squirrels, chipmunks, and things to distract me outside. As you know, and as fans of the podcast know, I'd like to dive right into things. I've got a long list of questions here for you.
Yep.
And we're gonna go right to it. So where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
Oh my goodness. So I grew up in Huntington, West Virginia. So if you have seen the movie We Are Marshall, we are the home of Marshall University. I grew up in what I think is a pretty normal childhood. My parents are both teachers. My mom taught high school family and consumer science, not home economics, family and consumer science. And my dad was like English, drama, literature, all those sort of things.
Family
and consumer science.
How is it different from home economics?
Well, it takes into account that, really running a household and a family and living in a consumerist world is very much a science. So there's a science to all the pieces of daily life, everything from like adult roles, how to behave as an adult. I really wish that they had kept that class by the time I entered high school. They did not. How to find an apartment, how to balance a checkbook. It wasn't just, cooking and sewing. It was really how to function in life and all the aspects.
Very good.
Thank you.
I imagine you being raised in a home with someone teaching that stuff at work would also hopefully picked up some of those skills. You seem to have.
Oh, you would think. She also did.
You're a fine consumer scientist.
I'm a fine consumer.
I imagine probably a pretty good home economist.
I cannot cook to save my life. I'm sure she's still shaking her head to this day on the fact that I can barely, boil an egg.
Well, there's paprika chicken.
I make paprika chicken, but I cannot boil an egg.
How do you? I mean,
not actually doable for me.
How do you boil the water?
Yeah. So I
in there.
Literally burned water before because I forgot to turn the stove off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't.
It's just not really my forte, and that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can't all do everything. But as you were growing up,
yes,
in Virginia, what sort of things did you do? What did little girl Margaret do?
I was very academic, so very into school. That was really my jam. And being a child of the 80s really was just kind of free range, hanging out with all the kids in the neighborhood. We had our classic, probably 7 to 10 of us who live within a 3-block area. And after
in like a little neighborhood, streets, yeah. Rows of streets.
Little rows of streets. And we would get together.
Brick houses.
Weekends, yep. All little brick houses. Hanging out at each other's houses on the weekend.
Jack and Diane.
Barbies, babysitting.
There were country roads nearby.
Yes. Relatives lived out very long country roads, up windy hills, up the mountains.
That sounds very good.
So,
do you remember the first time that you made a gift or that you did something intentionally generous?
I do, and I've given some thought to this one because I've actually watched you ask this question of so many other people. And it's probably one of my favorite questions that you ask people because for me, it is such a common denominator that it really doesn't matter. I think where someone's coming from in life, their first giving experience is so often very similar. They made a gift for a parent or they made something in school or what have you. And I love that. I had to think about mine because I'm sure there was probably a macaroni necklace or something. But the first one that I really remember that I planned out and structured and decided on what I was doing was I was about 4 or 5 years old. my dad is also a musician. So I also grew up in a lot of like recording studios and watching him sing and all these things. I decided that I wanted to make an album for my grandfather for his birthday. So I planned out the songs. Highlights included Peter Cottontail and of course, Happy Birthday. I remember going into the studio and recording it and giving, and giving the guy my $5. I had $5 that I assumed that's what it cost to make this. And giving.
You went to a recording studio?
Yes, I did. And made it an album, made it a tape at the time, because it was the early 80s, a tape for my grandfather for his birthday with my $5.
Where is that tape now?
I'm not 100% sure where the tape is, although it has been converted to a CD. And several years ago, my parents gave me a copy of the CD.
So you have this?
I do own it. Yeah.
I have footage of me as Charlie in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh. Yeah.
And perhaps one day we would, to make it fair, you can particularly the golden ticket scene.
Oh.
Difficult for me to watch.
I'd love to watch you running around a stage. I got a golden ticket.
Yeah, I sing the song and everything.
Love it.
So it sounds like music was a big, and I know this because I know you.
Yeah.
Music was a big and early part of your life.
Absolutely.
And I thought one of your parents was a music educator.
My dad has taught music. He's technically an English teacher. He also taught English, drama, theater, tennis.
Naturally, of course.
Yeah. My great
tennis is the most literary of the sports.
Yeah. Yeah. My great aunt was actually a choir teacher. But that's on the other side. Yeah.
As you know, I have relatives who are music educators. 2 of them now.
Yes.
Alex Moss and her father.
Yep.
Are music educators, not band teachers.
Nope. Music educators.
Music educators.
Yeah.
And very good. They are very good ones. They've won awards for music education.
Woohoo.
He was like Rookie of the Year teacher or whatever.
Oh, I think I saw that. Good job, Alex. Well done.
Yes. Congratulations, Alex Moss, who obviously listens to her cousin's podcast.
Well, if she's going to listen to just one, she's going to listen to this one. So.
How, do you sing? What's your personal involvement in music?
That's an interesting question. I love music, and if you couldn't tell from my reference to Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme earlier, I can usually make a reference to music out of almost anything. It's just kind of songs are what's in my head naturally. Mm-hmm. I am not a great singer. I love doing it. I have done it. I have, sung in places and on albums. I am not the first.
Oh, that CD that is in your possession. It's
not the first one you call if that's what your requirement is, but
you sing in church when you go to church?
I mean, probably. Yeah.
That was a definite.
Yeah.
What sort of church do you go to?
I'm a Methodist. Grew up in the Methodist. Yeah.
I have heard singing in a Methodist church. Mm-hmm. It wasn't great. I've just the limited experience with that.
Sure.
But it's not necessarily a lot of people associate the church choir with being very good, right? Mm-hmm. And some are terrific. You and I got to go to one time. Remember we went to the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, which was a spectacular, and slightly weird experience.
It's true. It was. But it was an amazing choir. I mean, they are...
Weird to me. I assume not weird to... Everybody's weirdness, right, has meaning for them. I want to think.
Yes. They did a really lovely job.
Tell me about being Methodist. There is a method of some kind, as I understand.
There is. And I've grown up in the Methodist Church. I've, been involved in various capacities. My parents are very active in the church. It is very, I like to think that we're pretty progressive. congregation for the most part. So you might follow in the news now. There's a lot of conversation around the Methodist Church, but for the most part, we are very open minds, open doors. At least the ones I've attended, and my own personal, Methodist beliefs. But we are, it's a pretty structured service. It's pretty traditional in terms of what one would expect walking into a Methodist service.
And what is the method? Am I allowed to know?
I don't. Oh, I actually took a class on the tenets of Methodism, and I'm not sure I could tell you what a method is. Wait, it is just
is there one?
We just
This is not a theology podcast, and those tuning in for that reason will be disappointed. Although I do engage in some amateur theology.
No, I mean it's
there is that thing that I remember. So Hillary Clinton is Methodist.
Yep.
And she used to say, "You do all of the things that you can, all of the people that you can, in all the ways that you can, for as long as you can."
Yeah, it's actually my screensaver.
You have that on your phone?
I do. It's actually one of the things that, and we may get into this later, that I think of when I think of philanthropy. And because I think there's a lot of connection there, and a lot of the reasons I do what I do in philanthropy is because of that upbringing, the idea that as an individual, you do all the things you can for all the people that can, all the ways you can, in any way you can.
Well, yes, it's very nice and lyrical phrase. I should have done some research, found out where it first came from. I don't think Hillary Clinton made it up.
No.
I would ask her about being Methodist is what she would say.
Is it John Wesley?
Sure. Is that person important to the method?
Yeah. So, sadly, but kind of poor example for a Methodist. Don't follow my method, people.
This is generally, I think, I like to present an approach. I think if you were to listen to a theology podcast, they might sometimes, it might not be what you want to listen to.
Fair.
You don't know, you can't quote the lines from the Bible, but in my experience, most people go to church or temple in my case, right? Where I mumble along to the songs in Hebrew. And every Jew I know does that, right? And I think one of the reasons why we do have declining church attendance and temple attendance and mosque attendance as well, I think. And in all sorts of public space, right? One of the reasons is those spaces don't always seem to be as inclusive as they should be. And something like the method should be including everybody, whatever the method might be.
Whatever the method is.
But certainly the concept of doing all the things you can and all of that that's something that everybody could find meaning with. I think I think in general it's very similar to some stuff that Jews say. I think we use fewer words. Sure. Just love thy neighbor, I think, is more or less the same thing.
I mean, if you really boil it down, sure.
Well, about for all of the people you can,
yeah.
I think raises a lot of questions for me, especially in these days, right? As you know, we have some international partnerships. I was talking to folks from Zambia yesterday, right? And I think we help them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that means that we can help anyone, which really obligates us. Pretty great deal, right?
Maybe that's where my guilt comes from in life. I don't know. But I think we do help them. I think, by providing the feedback and doing the calls and really helping set themselves up for the next step and for success down the road, we're doing the thing that we can do, which is supporting them in their journey. And that's the way that we can help them. That doesn't have to mean, go to Zambia and help them start their startup. It can just be, this is the way we're helping, is providing feedback and talking to them and helping them figure out what their next steps are.
Yes. I don't have to go all the way to Zambia.
Yeah.
I could talk to them just exactly how you and I are talking now.
It's magic.
So you said you went to school in your hometown? You went to Marshall?
I did. Yes.
Did you think about going away? Or was it always going to be Marshall?
No, I spent a lot of time. One thing, Dave probably knows about me, I'm very analytical. I like to figure out all of the aspects of everything that I possibly can before committing to anything. So when I was looking at colleges, I had actually spent most of my senior year of high school abroad in France. So I did the high school exchange student thing to France for a while.
Where in France?
In Normandy, in a teeny tiny town called Gouy.
What?
Gouy, Gouy. It's outside of Rouen, which is where Joan of Arc burned at this point. Yeah, when I first read it, I was like, I'm going to a place called Gouy. And I got there and it's Gouy.
Gouy?
Gouy. Gouy.
Oh, very cool.
So I came back and was applying to schools, and I did apply to several schools, and my original intent had been to go someplace. Literally every school I applied to, I had a very different major, and not just like shades of the same major, but like one was film development, one was international affairs, one was communications. I mean, it was just all over the map. And I was fortunate. My grandparents had offered I could either go to Marshall and they would fund like side excursions for what I wanted to do, or I could use some of the funding to go away to school. And after having spent the time in France in high school, I decided that I really wanted to do that again. And the easiest way to do that would be to go to Marshall, where it didn't really matter what I mean, I could be undecided for the first year and a half, but I could use those resources. And then during that time, I also went back to AUP, American University of Paris. I went to Freie University in Berlin. I came up to Georgetown for a little while. So I attended Marshall, but I was able to really pick from a whole lot of experiences to create this like really cool opportunity for those 4/5 years.
Awesome.
Thanks.
So I didn't write a question about travel.
Oh, that's okay.
But I did write, I sort of did. I wrote, do you have any other culturally significant form of education that informed your views on Give It?
Yeah.
I think very much. I remember you were involved in some sort of like girls travel group.
Oh.
Point, perhaps. I just remember generally when we first met, I remember we had some proposals related to like traveling for good or something.
Yeah.
All the time, but I remember like and I have it in my notes for you as an evaluator, right? That is one of the many topics that you might review on.
Yeah. I love travel.
So it was you got to travel to Gouy.
I did. I was another
Gouy instilling the love of travel in Margaret.
Well, actually, like I grew up because my parents were teachers. My dad almost every summer was a delegate to the National Education Association conference. And so every summer we would go on vacation to wherever NEA was, and they moved around constantly. So we traveled to wherever that meeting was that year. And we traveled.
My mom used to go to the MLA conference. Yeah. So that was most of my travel as a kid.
Was to conferences.
Which the travel bug never really stuck with me.
Oh.
I'm glad I visited some places, but I also think there's plenty of stuff you can do where you live, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you've had a chance to experience that over the past couple of years. But I do. I love traveling, and so I'm.
Yes, and one thing in particular I know you do. You go as an adult to Disney World.
I do.
Tell me about because I've talked to other people about it, and they're like, and they start asking me questions. They're like, "But why and what?" And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not the one. I'm not the adult going to Disney World.
That's fair.
So yes, to me, I mean, it's lines, screaming children, like melted and then dried ice cream. This is what I think about, right? Sticky park bench.
I'm not sure where you're getting the melted and dried ice cream, but
someone dropped an ice cream and it's Florida. It's hot, so it melted and then
it dries,
and then dried, and now it's just a sticky ice cream mess there. This is what that's what I think. Like when you're like, would you like to go to Disney World? I'm saying no while thinking about that melted and then dried ice
cream. So I will say, I mean, I grew up.
You must think about something else. What do you like? Someone asks you to go to Disney World. You check your calendar to see if you're available.
I do. I check my calendar and say, why am I even checking my calendar? When are we going? Because I grew up. So one of the trips we took every year, my dad would sing on a cruise ship, and before and after the cruise,
your dad would sing on a cruise ship.
So we would go to Disney World because it would lift out of Cape Canaveral, which is right near Orlando. So it became one of those things where like that's something we did almost every year. It became a family experience. And as I grew up,
I mean, a lot of people, their fathers sang on a cruise ship, and then they would go to Disney World.
Obviously, I mean that's just what you did, right? Typical,
very standard West Virginia upbringing. That's what John Denver was singing about.
So it just became something that like my friends and I would go. I have my best friend who lives now in Singapore for a little while. She and her mom would come down with us. And as I grew up, we just started going to more of the festivals and fairs. So they also do a garden festival. They do a food and wine festival. As an adult, when I started getting into running, I would go down and do a lot of the half marathons and marathons down there. Really the key to going as an adult with not kids, because I don't is to go in off times. And so I love going in the fall and around Christmas because it's not hot. I mean, it might be warm, but it's not hot. They have the festivals where you can get like all kinds of different food. You can see shows. It has the rides, but there's also like all the other experiences. Plus, like just going is one of those places where, you know, you walk in the door, you have pretty much zero responsibilities while you're there. You get to, you know, kind of be a kid again in the time that you're there, which is always fun.
That part sounds nice.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed my last big excursion was that guided trip to Israel.
Oh, yeah.
What I really liked about that, and I really got into this after a couple of days, like it was very heavily scheduled.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to choose anything.
Yeah.
At all. I just got to, I would get up, dress myself, and then like flow along, right? Russ and like there were like other captains like in charge of like, I didn't even move until someone told me to like, I just sort of milled about and talked to folks until Russ or somebody else told me it was time to eat. It was almost always time to eat, Margaret.
That is true too. I love food. And so going to Disney World at certain times of the year means that
food is good.
Walk and eat. And then who doesn't like that?
Yeah. Terrific. You go to some other places too, though, right?
Yeah, I do. It's true. I just go to Disney World.
The thing for me, I mean, I can sort of see how an adult could go to Disney World and have fun, but the world's a big place.
Sure is.
There's many, like you could go to not a theme park.
Yeah, I do. And I still enjoy the traveling.
Do you think you'll go again? How many more times do you believe you'll go to Disney World?
In my lifetime?
Yeah.
Oh, jinkies.
Jinkies.
Jinkies. I don't know. I mean, there's my
five more times.
How many?
5.
Oh, more than 5.
More than 5.
Down in Orlando most Januaries now, so like probably once a year.
So you're looking at, you could go 50 trips.
And Jody loves to go, so as soon as, you know, like she wants to go, like
okay.
More times. Yeah, that's not an unreasonable expectation in the rest of my lifetime.
Terrific. So back to school.
Yeah.
Right. So you decided to go to Marshall.
Sure did.
And you looked at some other schools. What were some of the other schools that you looked at?
Pittsburgh was one. Elon College, now Elon University. Mm-hmm. Those are the top 2 where I had narrowed it down. I liked Pittsburgh, and they had a really good honors program and some cool programs like around theater and film. Elon, Jennifer, my friend who I mentioned lives in Singapore, she was going to Elon. And I was like, oh, that looks pretty cute. I will look into going there. I looked at a couple other ones. I looked back, you know, going back to France and whatnot. Again, at the end of the day, it just made sense to hang out in Huntington.
So, how is Marshall? I don't think I know. How is Marshall funded? Is it a private?
It's a public school. It's a public institution. We do get a lot.
University of Pittsburgh.
Elon is private, and Marshall both public schools. They do get a lot of grant funding, and I think especially now they're getting a lot of larger donor funding. I mean, universities always are classically large donor funded, right, for specific programs. But especially with
Christine Marshall in some headlines recently for getting large gifts.
Yep. Well, it doesn't hurt when the current president is the former CEO of Intuit.
Okay.
So that, is very helpful. I mean, he just funded like a really great extension to the business school, which is amazing and has a whole new like PhD program and all these great new opportunities for students in the business side that I think will be just a huge boost to the university. And I'd love to get philanthropic school stuck in there somewhere too.
Yes.
Yep.
When you were choosing between Elon and Pittsburgh and Mark, how much did you understand about the how the schools are funded?
Honestly, at the time, I didn't really think about it. I knew just like by reading that Elon was private. It just also in reading about the school itself, you can kind of tell like, oh, this is a private institution. The other two
been more expensive for you.
It was more expensive. I was out of state. Pittsburgh also out of state, but state school. So they're also much larger. So, Pittsburgh and Marshall were much larger than Elon in terms of student bodies. But in terms of like thinking about where the money was coming from, I honestly didn't think about it too much as in terms of a deciding factor or even like a thing that was on my radar about like, oh, this is public or blah, blah. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you had like a different major for each school you thought of. What was the one for Marshall? What was
undecided? Like literally my major, because I knew that it was a homeschool. I had already gotten money.
So
it didn't matter what I put, so I put undecided.
There were specific plans for if you had gone to a different school.
Yes.
Like what was the plan for Elon?
Elon was international communications.
Sure. Okay. And then Pittsburgh would have been.
Pittsburgh was theater and film.
But then Marshall, whatever.
Marshall was undecided, and I figured that once I took some classes, I could figure out what I really wanted to do, which is actually another positive for going there. Was since I was so undecided, it felt kind of silly to spend money on a program that I may or may not love. So I
imagine international communications and theater still sort of in the mix in your mind.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Marshall, did you take any classes in those areas?
Yep, I took a couple theater class my first semester, history of theater, and a communications class first semester, and second semester took a bunch of like international affairs classes, and that's kind of what cemented that I didn't want to do the communication side, but I loved the international side. I loved foreign policy, international affairs, economics, and the business of international affairs. So it really allowed me to take a lot of different things and kind of figure out what my niche was without having to kind of commit early on.
I remember I was having a hard time. I did not want to major in theater. I don't know why. But like I just didn't want to. I wanted to study something else, but I hadn't chosen anything else. Then my advisor saw me in a play and was like, "No, you're not. Like you
gotta
not going to be that good at anything else. So you should major in theater." But I did end up majoring in theater. And what did you end up majoring in for undergraduate?
International affairs and economics.
All right, different.
Yeah. Yeah, slightly different from the theater and film that it could have been.
Talk to me a little bit more about the theater. Did you do theater in college at all?
No, I didn't. I did politics. I was knee deep in politics in college, and outside of the one theater class and some like just drama communications classes, I really didn't. That was something that kind of came about later. I did a little bit in high school when I would like go to theater camps and things, but once I got to college and I started getting in with the political crowd, that really became my focus for those 4 years. It didn't hurt that my freshman year was going into a presidential election year. And so it was, that's all people were talking about. It was the Gore-Bush election. It was, there was just so much excitement over it. So that's really where a lot of my energies got focused.
Yes, that was my first time voting.
Oh, me too.
So I'm gonna put a pin in because I know you got back into theater as an adult. So put a pin, and we'll put a pin in that for a moment. So now you do. It seems like you do understand how the school, like you understand as well as anyone I know, how institutions like Marshall or Elon and many other institutions are funded.
Yeah.
Do you think that would have affected your decision in any way? Do you enjoy that you went to a public? Marshall's a great reputation school. They made a movie out of it.
The movie.
Right. And fun campus pride, fun. Good.
My parents both went to Marshall. We were a big Marshall family. My mom and grandfather probably went to every Marshall football game.
Yes, I see on Facebook whenever I know there's a Marshall game. I see.
My mom's. She will literally reschedule her trips to visit me to make sure she's back in time for football games. So, yeah.
Very good.
It goes deep in our family, the Marshall genes.
So do you give money to Marshall?
I have over the years.
Volunteer time with for like I know these with younger alumni. That's a big part of the engagement program is sort of like get you involved with a committee or something.
Yeah.
So are you a Marshallette? What do they call a? So here at Colby, if you're a fundraiser, there's my grandmother was in the Colbiana Club.
Aww.
They have like other clubs like with names like that. Do you have any kind of Marshall affiliation?
Well, apparently I'm not high enough in order to get a cool name.
Cool name.
We are.
They should think about it.
We are just now starting hopefully, if I say it out loud, it probably won't happen. A DC chapter of the Marshall Alumni Association.
Okay, cool.
So I've been, helping out with that and hoping to get that launched and off the ground.
That could be very useful for Marshall alumni who live in DC.
Yeah, there is one in that
cause. They have something they can talk about, learn what each other's doing, right? Welcome new folks, right? Because there's always new career folks coming in to DC. I know the Dickinson Alumni Network doesn't have a chapter or anything, but there was a database. I looked up the most senior people in the area. I got free lunches out of it.
Ooh. I mean, we actually have we have a good number of alumni every year. Usually,
not far away.
Yeah, in June we there's a big Marshall alumni event. It used to be at the museum. This past year it was at an office building on the wharf. But there's probably a couple hundred people in the greater DC area who have an affiliation to Marshall of some sort, and the president comes in, President Marshall. And the football coaches, all the coaches come in, leaders of the university, and do a state of the university in DC. So there actually is a good grounding of people in the DC area from Marshall. So it's a little surprising that up till now there hasn't been a chapter, but I'm hoping that
I think you're the one to do it.
Yay!
Are they herd? Are they some sort of thundering herd?
A thundering herd. Yeah.
All right, great. Go thundering herd.
Yep.
So I'm going to move on into your professional career here in a moment. But before we do, after Marshall, you get a bachelor's degree.
Yep.
And then you got. Then what happened?
School-wise?
Yeah.
I moved to DC, and when I was starting my first job in the DC area, I decided to go back for grad school. So initially, I actually was going to go into the Foreign Service. I passed the Foreign Service exams my senior year of undergrad. I had planned on going to the Foreign Service. Instead, I took a job with the Kerry campaign in West Virginia and ended up going that route. And I've never gone back into the Foreign Service route. But in my head, I thought maybe I would at some point. So I decided to go to grad school, and I went to GW, George Washington University. And over the next 10 years, ended up with 3 master's degrees in various topics.
3 master's degrees.
Yeah.
I
like school. It's kind of my thing.
So how many years? Is that 6 years of school?
For masters? It took me a little bit longer because I also...
Because you were working while you did them? So your master's, you have an MBA?
I have an MBA, master's in European and Eurasian Studies, and a master's of arts.
Is that 2 masters? It's European and Eurasian Studies.
It's one. It's all smushed together. European and Eurasian.
You got... I think you got the raw end. You did twice the work.
Wait, so does that mean I should have had 4? I should have had 4 degrees.
Yeah, 4 masters.
Sweet. All right. More paper for the wall.
And you're interested in, I remember you talked to Dad about you wanting to get a PhD on top of all that.
I do.
What is what are you currently pursuing the additional degree still?
Yeah, I mean, I have kind of yes and no. I would love to, and I'm in the middle of trying to figure out exactly.
You're undereducated.
I'm completely undereducated for what I want to do, which is being a full-time student for the rest of my life. And I think it really comes down to deciding what I really want to focus on. I've talked to a handful of people at Indiana about their philanthropic program. They have an online PhD in philanthropy. George Mason,
Dr. Margaret of Philanthropy.
Yeah.
So useless in any emergency situation.
Except in a situation, at which point it is very useful.
But helpful in a
nonprofit
analyst of philanthropic trends.
Exactly.
Right. But they would come long after the trends were trending, the analysis.
Possibly. And yeah. But gosh darn it, I would analyze the heck out of those trends.
It would be analyzed.
I'd be analyzed. Yeah.
Very good. So in the early days of the podcast,
yep.
Particularly on wine grants, which unfortunately this is not wine grants. We're not drinking. Afterwards, I'm gonna
maybe. I have some water.
I have a vitamin water. I had a vitamin water. I only made it out here with me.
I do remember.
But I used to read I would go online, find a bio for my guest, the most easily accessible bio.
Sure.
And I would read it out loud for them. We're gonna do that.
Excellent. Go for it.
The stuff you discussed. This is from, I found it on your website.
Awesome.
Margaret Chapman.
That's me.
Second word, I did all those tongue twisters.
What happened to the theater training? I don't know. I just don't know.
Margaret Chapman, MBA, MA, has spent the last 20 years of her career helping organizations with their finance, operations, fundraising, and overall programmatic strategy. From national candidates and multi-billion-dollar nonprofits to small startups, she leverages what's unique about each group to ensure they are able to leap to the next phase in their growth. Leap. Specifically, Margaret focuses on using strategic planning methods in building robust back-office systems that fit the needs of the organization. Rethinking staffing, accounting, and operational structures are her specialty. Throughout her career, Margaret has worked to make financial analysis processes and all things money approachable for all audiences. Dealing with numbers is often anxiety-producing, but Margaret translates finance speak into easily understandable concepts and practices that every organization can efficiently implement and feel confident in sharing. Margaret was the vice president of political CFOs. That's Chief Financial Officer. And has worked with large nonprofits such as the Pew Charitable Trusts, the George Washington University's Cancer Institute. She has also served as principal at the Unfunded List and has consulted for Street Sense Media, American Alliance for Theater and Education, and others. She has a master's in business administration, as well as history and European and Eurasian affairs from the George Washington University. So when I read that sentence out loud, it sounds like you have.
Sounds like 4. Yeah.
But it is written down here. It is an ampersand. One of those ands was an ampersand.
It's tricky. Sneaky like that.
She has bachelor's degrees in international affairs and economics from Marshall University. Margaret serves on the board of the national nonprofit Triage Cancer and as president of the board of the theater company, the St. Mark's Players.
That's me.
Pretty good bio.
Thanks.
Very good. I think one of the things that's very interesting, and when you first approached and asked to help on Funded List was appealing to me, I don't have experience. I've never worked. The largest group I was ever involved with, I think, was Atlas Corps. Mm-hmm. No, I was very low. I was development assistant at the Seed Foundation, and they had 30 people working there. And then there were like hundreds of people at the schools, but I wasn't like on campus or anything. Atlas Corps had 10 people, but NIRA was 2 people, Public was 2 people. Right now, Unfunded List is 1 person. There's occasionally been other people.
Sometimes 2.
Like I really only know about working by myself. You, on the other hand, very large institutions. So like the Cancer Institute is part of George Washington, which is like one of the biggest universities in the world, budget-wise anyway. And the Pew Charitable Trusts, it's a very large trust. Joseph Pew, not Methodist, Presbyterian, I think.
I think so.
I don't know I forget how he made his money. Industrialist of some kind.
Was it Sun Oil? Is it oil? Yeah, something like that.
Well, Rockefeller is oil.
That's right, Rockefeller.
It could be more than one person got rich on oil. Getty and Rockefeller were oil. Carnegie is steel. I don't really remember. You might be newspapers, to be honest. We should know. We are philanthropy.
Work there. I feel like I should know. Maybe I've just.
It's often when I meet people, I stopped like doing that. Like I remember I met somebody from Ford once. And I tried to like talk to them about Henry Ford, and they like, it's not part of their everyday life. Like they're not thinking about Ford at work.
Right.
In fact, it's some controversial stuff with Ford, so they've like kind of distanced themselves from it.
No, that makes sense.
And like when we were being funded by MacArthur, never did anyone mention like the founders.
Founders MacArthur.
One of them, Cynthia, John and Cynthia, I think, MacArthur. And again, they are newspapers.
Newspaper, yeah.
It's funny to think about people becoming so rich off newspapers that it doesn't really make me think of like big money maker.
Yeah,
right.
It's more of a money.
They're like the tech. It's like the tech sector of the time, really, because that was the controlling information.
It's huge.
And data. So talk like and I suppose this is part of your work now, right? Because sometimes you're working with bigger organizations, or like larger scope organizations. Even here at Unfunded List, sometimes we're reviewing a small local organization, or we're reviewing something that was international. Like there's sort of, when we review the international submissions, they're sort of doubly international because one, the evaluators are reviewing a proposal from another country, and that author is submitting to a funder in another country. So the evaluators also have to think through sort of 2 cultural lenses, and they also have to think about large organization for often, right? So you've worked with small organizations that might want funding from organizations similar to Pew, right? I think that gives you very good perspective, I would imagine. Right? What is the what's it like? The difference between, because I don't know that many people who they either are in big organizations or they're in small ones. I don't know folks who like go back and forth. Right? How have you been able to do that? What is it about Margaret?
Well, I kind of ended up at Pew. It was not a strategic move at the time.
You were like lost?
I was a little bit. I had left. Yes. I was in Chinatown and I was like.
They were like, well, can you do bookkeeping?
I was like, I've been working in campaign finance for like 7 or 8 years at that point. I decided that after the 2010 cycle, I didn't want to do that anymore. So a friend of mine that I had met, actually that we went to school together in France, worked at Pew. And I ended up going there to work. And it was an incredibly different experience because for the previous time in my life, I had worked with a very small office, a consulting firm. And we worked with state political parties that sometimes could be hundreds of people large during the campaign season, but most of the time were pretty small. That you get a lot of money coming in and out, but again, it was cyclical. So then to transition to a place where I have multiple layers of people who have to look at something before anything happens to it, was really it was a rough transition sometimes. because I was used to being able to just get things done on my own and just, if I made a decision to do X, Y, or Z, I did it. And now I was part of this machine, essentially. And for everything, there was a multi-step process that involved no fewer than 10 people. And it was really took some thinking through. One of the things that I did while I was there, I worked a lot in the contracts and grants department, and they were in the middle of restructuring that whole department from being embedded staff with every program to creating its own separate grants and contracts department. And so I got to be on the team of 5 or 6 of us who actually designed the department and created the best practices for managing all of the money coming in and out, and what are the contracts, what do the grants look like, what are the processes that we need to go through if we want to give money to somebody, or if we want to apply for a grant or take a contract, and really make it as efficient as we could given the restrictions of working within the Pew infrastructure. But it was one of the things I'm really the most proud of that I did while I was there, is getting to see this this department where all of these people are coming from their individual programs and creating this whole new entity within the Pew universe. The
Pewniverse.
Universe, yeah. There were a lot of those. It's like the Scholar.
Did people say? I remember when we were talking to Skoll, we would talk about the
Scholarverse.
Yeah, they say Scholarverse, I think.
Yeah, I think I say Scholarverse.
But it should have been Scholar System.
Oh, it was Scholar System.
Or yeah, I think I forget. It was one of the other. Scholar System seems like the obvious.
That seems more logical. I don't remember what we definitely had.
I'm sorry, the Pewniverse is.
I'm pretty sure
pretty obvious.
It was its own entity. I mean, when you talk to anyone who's worked there, they will admit it is its own culture and its own universe inside that building.
People accomplish some very important stuff. In particular, they do the largest demographic study of Jews. It's how we have any idea how many Jews there are, and other interesting studies as well. And I imagine I know they do work on state budgets and stuff like that. So I imagine that's how your political finance background fit into there.
I also got to learn so much about, I started off in the health division, which I had zero background in whatsoever. But the amount that I learned about the lack of an antibiotics pipeline, the rigor of medical device evaluation and approval, prescription drugs. I mean, it was, as you know, when I talk to folks through Unfunded List, one of my favorite parts is to talk to everybody at the end of the round and learn about what they do and what problem they're solving. And so for me, Pew was that. It was every day I got to learn about a problem that's out there and how we can fix it and solve it through all of these different mechanisms. And I think that was, for me, one of the best parts.
Well, we have seen it several times. Folks who maybe originally wanted to do their own thing, and they've sent us a proposal to review, and our feedback is critical in ways that they hadn't considered, right? And they end up going to do something else. Sometimes engaging with a larger institution that's already working on the issue.
Yeah.
Which is a difficult metric for us to track, but I do think it's a way that we're having positive impact. I know we did at Public, which was only a couple people actually working there, but we did have a partnership with the White House, which is a big unruly place. And I was able to see quite quickly how much more I can get done when I have just that we didn't have money from them or really much of anything. We didn't have staff time or much, I got to use the space a few times really, and their name. I got to call people and say, we're working on a campaign with the White House. Can you help? And that really, you can a lot of the there's not so much you can do with the proposal. Nobody knows who you are. You got no reach. There's already big organizations working on the issue. And that's, it takes a special kind of person to break through. I don't want to say that it's impossible in those cases. Yeah. But I think it also takes a special kind of people to work at Pew. We did you led a panel on this topic once, which is available for folks to listen to.
You definitely should listen to it, because it's one of my biggest things, and Dave's heard me talk about this about a bit.
What's the name again?
You don't have to be a founder.
Yeah.
The idea
did a founder. So you want to be a founder with founders,
yeah,
and then you went afterwards with. You don't have to be a founder with people who were not founders, but were having quite a bit. And I think arguably those folks, one of those organizations doesn't exist. Of the founders, one of them doesn't exist anymore. And I don't want to put it on blast right now. 2 of them don't exist anymore. Oh my God, it just occurred to me. Run for Something we just closed up a little while ago.
But
that's very interesting. We should do a follow-up about that. And the ones who said, like the ones who weren't founders, those organizations, one of them's few, and it's still very much having impact. And so, like, if impact's important to you, working at an institution that we know is going to be there is a good decision to make.
Yeah.
By getting involved here with Unfunded List, we've taken a risk, which I was okay with doing because there is no big organization out there giving feedback to grab.
And I think that's my big thing is that if someone else is already doing it and they're doing it well and they're doing it resourced, like, we don't need to recreate the wheel every time. If it's a completely new thing, if it's an unfunded list and there isn't another one, then by all means, and I'm not against people starting new things. I think it's just make sure that you do that analysis ahead of time to know what the landscape is before you just walk into it because you had an idea. You could often have an even greater impact by working with someone else already in the field. That's one of my soapboxes. So I'm just going to jump right back off the soapbox now and hang out back up here.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
In the arts, right? Obviously there's billion, like, it's a big industry, right? There's arts that make millions of dollars, sometimes billions. There are films, movies, and video games, actually, which I would call art, that have made, right, in the billions, right? There's certainly artists make a similar decision, right, to go work. Like, you can work in Hollywood and you will be probably a very small part of the project. You'll get to work on projects that a singular artist could only really ever dream of, right? Except for there's certain mediums like painting or like being a novelist, right? Which must, by definitionally, are just one person, right? Sure. But you have chosen to do community theater. Which is not like which is definitionally you can't possibly become rich. There's no storyline where doing this community theater ends up with you. No, maybe like a wealthy widow would always come to the plays, and when she dies, she leaves it to you, right?
I mean, I guess the only other
like, it's obviously not. It's not why you do it.
It's not why I do it.
I don't think it's why you're not particularly money-oriented person, but like you can't even sustain yourself doing community theater. And you weren't doing it in college, and you weren't in a show, and you were so good where your advisor wouldn't let you major in anything else or anything. So, like, how did you get back? How did you get involved with St. Mark's Players? And I know you're always like working on often you couldn't make it to a meeting with me because you had to. I remember, and I think in my defense, I know the show must go on. If there's rehearsal, there's rehearsal.
There's rehearsal. Sorry,
my stuff can probably wait.
But so it was fun. I grew up again with a family kind of in music and the arts generally. And then in high school, I did a little bit, but I didn't really think about it after that. And you mentioned Street Sense in the bio. For several years, I was the board chair of Street Sense Media in DC. It's a
folks who don't live in DC.
It's a newspaper written about homeless issues affecting those experiencing homelessness, often by those experiencing homelessness. It's also, if you look it up, it's grown so much. I've talked just 2 seconds about it from the time I was there, where it was a biweekly newspaper with a couple workshops. Now it's a weekly newspaper, sometimes biweekly. There's podcasts, there's art, there's theater, there's music. They do galas. Like, it has grown so much, and I just love watching that. But I was on the board, and that was almost a second job during the years that I was board chair. And I was rolling off. I happened to roll off at the same time as a fellow board member. Her name's Heidi. And she worked a lot with the St. Mark's Players. And she'd always talked about it when we were at board meetings, and it just sounded like the funnest thing ever. And so we were having lunch one day, and I was like, I would like to do something else now that, I'm going to have all this free time. And the first thing she said was, well, we're doing Sweeney Todd in the winter. Do you want to be the light board operator? And I was like, I don't know anything about lights. Unlike Dave, I know nothing about lighting or sound, but all right, sounds good. So I ran the light board for Sweeney Todd. As probably one of the most complicated lighting shows I've ever done.
I was like,
we had like 150 cues plus.
Yeah.
It was amazing though, every night to do it.
I would imagine some spot, like one of the hardest things to do as an operator is to turn the spot on from on a dark set and hit the thing you're supposed to hit.
And we did all of the kill shots were done by lighting, so you would have to wait until he was getting ready to
right,
cue the.
If you miss it, then the death looks wrong. Yeah,
exactly. But it was amazingly fun, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
No one appreciates the work of the light board operator.
It
makes a show like that very. I did a show called Woman in Black in Portland, and it's like almost entirely sound and lights. Like the actresses sort of occasionally stand on stage, and then we do light tricks. Like that's what that show is.
I mean, it's one of those things where if you do it well, everyone just kind of is like, "Oh, that was a good show." If it's done poorly, it's one of the few things that can really just mess up a show. If like the lights are terrible or the sound doesn't work. But after that, I just was in love, and I started doing props, which it called Arts and Crafts with a Purpose, because I love doing arts and crafts, but I was running out of space to put things in my house. So props, arts and crafts with a purpose, and then getting into producing. And so now, after a couple of years with St. Mark's, I joined the board, and I've been there.
Last time I was driving through New York, I saw the Back to the Future musical.
Oh, I want to see that. Yeah,
it's awesome. I mean, it's got some new songs, and then they obviously play the like music from the movie. The actors, I don't know if it's still the same folks from the original run, but they're terrific. It's almost as good as the original Marty and Doc Brown.
I have to say, so my this funny story, my dad looks a lot like Doc Brown.
He does.
When I was a kid, and he had slightly more hair. Yep. The number of times we've been stopped on vacation and people have been like, "Oh my gosh, are you Christopher Lloyd?" And my dad's like, "No." But
I brought it up because it seems to me, and I wonder if you agree, right? So like, you could do that show, Back to the Future, right? Which is one of the biggest stage productions of the last few years, right? Most money involved, right? Probably reached the most number of people. Boy, the line. Oh God. It's like, I'll go to a Sunday matinee. So many children.
Oh, really?
So many children. But I mean, and honestly, Times Square is just like sort of too crowded these days. Like, it's too crowded. Too many. It's like not sustainable. That's on the side. It seems to me that's the like Pew Charitable Trusts of when it comes to like stage plays.
Yep.
Right. And then you could be at a small family foundation or a startup nonprofit or whatever, and that is community theater.
Yep.
Right. And there are things that, like, obviously we're not going to cover all of the myriad things that art needs and wants to cover with just the glitzy Broadway shows, right? Just like we can't possibly meet, like Pew can't possibly be expected to meet every single social need. I've come up with, this is a good metaphor.
I like the analogy there.
Is it an analogy? It's not only as a
no, it might be an analogy.
It's a comparison between industries.
Yeah, it's a comparison. We'll go with that.
As a theater professional, you'd have to choose, like, am I going to make a living, which means working for shows like Back to the Future, or like, do I just enjoy props, right? Is this something that I can do, right, as a hobby that will keep me doing well? You and I have talked often about how the theater skills are very useful for many other things. I think it's one of the reasons why we've had a long, productive relationship here at Unfunded List. I do want to talk a little bit about what you do professionally when you're not unfunded listing.
Yes, I'd love to.
So that bio I read for you comes from the website for Jam Strategies.
Yes.
Right. So this is a firm that's like for people who are making, jellies and jams, other preserves, right? And they need to work on their
recipes and their strategy. Yeah, exactly.
Your blackberries, your mulberries.
Yeah, we like to be unique in
Europe. You're like lindenberry or whatever they got.
Yeah, we do enjoy the more exotic jams and jellies. Fig is a classic for us.
Sure.
Yeah.
But what is, in all seriousness, what is Jam Strategies?
Yeah. So Jam Strategies We work with a variety of nonprofits on all kinds of strategies. So that could be strategic planning, financial communication strategy, messaging, some fundraising. We really like to work with the organization on figuring out how they can do things more effectively and efficiently. It started several years ago with my business partner, Jody. It's where the jam actually comes from. It's Jody and Margaret. And we've actually known each other for 20 years. So fun story. We met in West Virginia. Jody was the governor's press secretary back in 2004, Governor Bob Wise of West Virginia. And I was at the state party. I was
state party, just like partying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
state party. Those
state,
cats can really get shaken down.
And I was in charge of the national convention for West Virginia in that year. We were in Boston, and Jody and I were the only two females going from the state as staff. I needed an extra room. We were very limited in our room space. Oh. And I called her, and I'd never met her before. And I said, hey,
I'm the other woman.
I'm the other one going. I need an extra room. Will you room with me? And we'll pay for it.
Nice to meet you, right? And I'm sure you like talked about pearls, like dresses and stuff for a little while.
We did actually both walk into the hotel room with
consumer science. Right? Shared some tips as fellow consumer scientists.
So that's how we met. And then we moved to DC and started our new jobs after that election, literally on the same day, February 7th, 2005. For those who don't know history, we did lose the 2004 election. And so both of us had to find new jobs. And we both ended up in DC, where we hung out, traveled. You talk about travel, like we've been a ton of places together, not just Disney World, all over Europe and the States. And a handful of years ago, people would come to us because she has 20-some years in communications. She's done messaging, communications, strategy, all that sort of stuff that requires words. She's done that for forever. And my background's finance and, like more of that numbers. And people will be like, hey, can the two of you work on this project for us together? And we realized, oh, this is actually a unique thing. Maybe people would pay us to do this together. And we launched Jam Strategies.
Very good. So people are working through something. They're like, we need the two women from West Virginia.
Obviously.
For this problem. Yep. There's only one way this problem's getting solved, and that's if West Virginia's only two women come here and who happen to have complementary skills.
Yep.
And so she's more of a communications type, and you are more of a finance and policies type.
Yep.
However, I happen to know that you can communicate.
Excellent. Well, we do actually. We've learned a lot from.
And I imagine she knows some stuff about finance.
She does. She has taught me a lot about messaging and communications, and she is the first person when we work on any sort of finance to harp on budgets and some grant stuff now. So I feel like we've trained each other well on what to know and what to say about the various fields.
So tell me a little bit more about why someone hires Jam Strategies or any strategic planning consultant.
Yeah, I mean, I think we bring, like we said, the complementary skills. So we have been working together for a very long time, and we kind of see it as very holistic. So a lot of folks will come in if you're doing a strategic plan, or you want to be more strategic about your program expansion or your fundraising or your general, just like whether we're going to go in one direction or another. And they're very siloed. A lot of folks will, only talk to the executives or only talk to your communications people if they're a comms person, only talk to finance and development. And we both have worked in enough nonprofits and in enough organizations to know that you have to include the whole. It cannot be something that only a couple people, weigh in on, that you have to look at communications with finance, and you have to look at program with development, that these things actually all live together. And I think that unique kind of messaging and branding for us, kind of coming in and pulling all of those pieces together to help the organization weed through all the stuff that, that they don't know they know. What have they been doing well? What haven't they done well? Where do they want to go from here? And we do it with a good deal of I would say fun and flair. We have what we call a jam session. We have a lot of marketing around the jam, as you can imagine. And where we actually try and draw out of an organization all of the ideas. The motto for that one is dream big, but focus small. Every idea is on the table. And then we're going to work with you to kind of figure out where should you really be focusing, and then detail that with implementation plans, communication, and finance plans on top of it. Because I think, again, all people will write their strat plan and have all these great lofty goals, but then what's the implementation? And not just the program implementation, but the communications implementation, the fundraising implementation. How am I going to pay for this? All of the pieces and the back office that have to follow along with whatever program you've decided to actually pursue. So that's a slightly longer spiel than I'm sure Jody would like for me to give. But she's like, oh, elevator pitch. Why didn't you work on that?
I imagine that a lot of it is just the outsider perspective that you bring.
Absolutely. But and we've been in the room. We've been
there, and you're going to be leaving. So right. You can hone in on the work and see it with different blinders. Similar to what we do at Unfunded. We're not strategic planning consultants, but the fact that we're not working there, we're not there day to day, allows us to see things that perhaps they cannot.
It's true.
Very good. We are finishing up.
Oh, awesome.
Do you have any questions for me before I go into the final questions?
Well, I didn't know that I would have questions for you.
You don't have to ask.
I don't have any questions.
I've had many chances. That's fine.
I've asked you a lot of questions over the past 6 years. I don't think I have any extras right now.
Margaret's gotten all of her.
I don't see Zelda in the picture, so I don't know. That would be my one.
She came out a couple times. She doesn't like to go up.
That's fair.
She is a floor cat. I wouldn't want anyone picking me up either.
That's fair. Yeah, no, that's a good call.
You come along and pick me up, you're gonna get the claws.
Tiffany does that.
So when it comes to philanthropy,
yes,
what are the major challenges for givers?
For givers, well, I think prioritizing the giving and what you want to give and what you want to fund. There are so many worthwhile causes out there and so many areas in need. And I think every round we do, I learn about even more of them. Issues that I didn't even know were issues. And now I'm like, well, now I want to fix that, right? So if I have a pot of money to give away, I think one of my biggest challenges is determining kind of where's my focus? What do I care the most about that I want to give money towards that? And also, what is the greatest bang for my buck to some extent? Where can I feel like I can have the greatest impact based on how much I have to give? Do I have $5 million to give? Do I have $50 to give?
So is that universal? I hear that a lot. Bang for your buck, impact. It is, in fact, something. If a funder wants to work with Unfunded List, I would probably be talking about how you could get more bang for your buck. Yep. I don't know. I personally don't think I would use that term. Now, having just said it now a couple of times, but I increase their impact. Right. Is it in fact true that all people who are donating money are need to maximize their? Is this the X Games for everybody?
I don't think so, and I think it's one of those things where. That's why I mentioned it as one of the several factors, because also having, is this a focus area that I care about? Maybe it's local and it's not, the biggest impact, but it's right down the street for me. So for me, it has a great impact because I can see it. I was actually part of a giving circle earlier, and in listening to the individuals debate where they thought the money should go, it was interesting to hear what the different priorities were for the people in that room, right? Some of them, it was just a bottom line financial, what is the impact per dollar? And for them, that was the greatest thing. For others, they really wanted it to go towards women and children. So which one of them had the greatest percentage of their population was women and children? whether it was, greatest financial need or not. But if, another one kind of worked on, other issues that weren't related to women and children, it went to the bottom of the pile. So I think that's why, for me, like one of the biggest challenges is determining what those priorities are, and then trying to figure out what organizations meet your individual priorities, whether you're an individual giver or an organizational giver.
I mean, I was talking to a friend recently. We just sort of it was after golf, and we were randomly talking. I was talking about the charitable tax deduction, which yes. He didn't, I guess he had like heard it. He didn't really fully understand what it was. And I was explaining to him that like, if he owes taxes at the end of the year, instead of giving that money to the government, he could give it to me, essentially, not to me, but to Unfunded List. We would do our work, and you, along with Lauren and Eric and the folks that do our finances and stuff, would make, and the IRS and the state of Maine and the various other entities that we file paperwork with, would make sure it was used for the mission, right? Mm-hmm. And he was pretty blown away. Like, he's like, he said very quickly, like, why wouldn't I do that? Right. I'm like, yes, it was meant to incentivize giving. You've said exactly what they are hoping the policy would encourage you to think, right? So and I do think for a lot of, and that's not, he was not thinking in that moment, I'll maximize my impact now. Right. That's really far away, in fact, from what, and I think there's very few givers who give, and he knows me personally and assumes, you don't even think he knows that much about my work, but he knows me personally, so assumes that I'm probably doing good work. And he fundamentally would prefer to do that over the government. If it's pay the exact amount here versus here, right? And for a lot of folks, they're doing their philanthropy through the wealth management consultant these days. A lot of philanthropy consultants, there's a big mix of wealth management in there. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's nice icing on the cake that we've maximized our impact as well. But fundamentally, I think there are, no matter what you're doing, there's some challenges.
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting bringing out my wonkiness here. I was in a class years ago where we were studying capitalism and the Enlightenment. And I remember getting into arguments with some unfortunate undergrads who argued that people give, the argument of the Enlightenment was that people give out of the goodness of their hearts. And that's the only reason that they give. And that's the only reason they should give. And of course, I'm sure that most of the kids in this class had never actually submitted taxes. So probably this was not as important to them. And we had this really actually great conversation on the role of the tax credit and getting people to donate more. And I remember, having this conversation and saying, it may not be the only factor that is determining whether or not you give. In fact, for most time, it isn't the only factor. But if you're at the end of the year deciding, do I give $100 or do I give $500? And I'm looking at my overall income for the year, and you realize that you want to have a little bit more to deduct, that may be a factor to give a little bit more, right? If you're already going to give a little bit, you might give a little bit more because I'm going to get to deduct that in a few months when I do my taxes.
So I've heard my experience is that I think people who donate are good, mostly. There's people who donate money to charity who are not good people. So that's why I've seen it up close. I've received donations from folks, and I'm going to take their money because I'm going to use it for good, but they're not
good people,
a good person, and they're not doing it for, certainly not out of any, their heart has no goodness in it. So that couldn't possibly have been the reason. I'm sure it does. I'm sure. I just hadn't seen that. These are,
I'm sorry. According to Pete's Dragon, there's good in everyone in this world. So, just.
I'm thinking, I had a few times there were some like elderly donors who gave at like, particularly in the DC area, who sort of give out of like, there's like an obligation, they're giving because their friends were giving. Sure. And they knew they had to, they couldn't say no to this certain person. And I was the one who had to collect these checks. So they would be sometimes rude to me about it and that sort of thing. I just don't, I just think about the opposite. Right. So like if we're giving out of the goodness of our heart, right, that means all good people will be giving a lot more. And that if that's the reason that people give, then people who weren't good wouldn't give.
Right.
But they do.
They do.
In fact, they do. And there's some social cachet that comes from it and stuff. And I think this is fine that in a modern society it's expected that people who have excess wealth will be donating.
Sure. And that makes sense.
And it's just not, and at that point, I think it's not sort of a good, it's not a, it's, if we're thinking about the Dungeons and Dragons alignment chart, right? Philanthropy is neutral. It is a thing, right? It's neutral like storms, right? And gravity, right? And
Sure.
perhaps. I think a good person can use a neutral tool to do good. Right? What are the major challenges for fundraisers, particularly fundraisers who come from, like the folks we talk to, for the most part, who come from whatever you want to call it, underserved backgrounds, marginalized backgrounds, unfunded backgrounds?
Sure. So one of my other soapboxes is the administrative overhead myth, and the idea that if you spend more than 10% or whatever the magical number is of your budget on overhead or administrative related expenses, you must not be doing a very good job programmatically, right? Mm-hmm. And as you know, as someone who's
if you need Post-it notes at work,
I know,
as you aren't doing a good job. You should just remember all that stuff.
Finance is never part of a grant. My position is always overhead. And I have to say, like, that position is usually incredibly critical to the program. And so I find that to be one of the hugest challenges when you're especially going after grant funding and you have to have that budget there and you have that line at the bottom that's like, how much is your overhead? And if you have a percentage there that's more than 10%, all of a sudden they start to question it. And you could have the best program ever and you just really are making a super difference in the lives of individuals. And you will always get a question about that overhead percentage. So for me, that is one of the biggest challenges in fundraising.
I think it's folks are starting to talk about it, and I think making moves. I know MacArthur upped their indirect cost percentage, and some other foundations have followed suit in that regard. I was talking to Mary Center in our final report discussion of the round the other day, and Heather mentioned that they're not saying general operations anymore. They're saying flexible funding. I thought that was clever.
Nice.
And I think, in fact, general operations was probably originally an effort to talk about administrative overhead costs.
Yeah.
And it's similar to like how the fundraising department became the development department and is now the advancement department. We're constantly changing these words, which I do think is another challenge for fundraisers. The language, some of the folks we talk to don't know what I mean, don't know general operations from restricted dollars.
No.
I've explained what restricted funding is to folks in after they've written a proposal for restricted funding.
I think one of the biggest issues is just navigating that world. Like you said, it's not just the language. It's how do I know who to even look to apply for funding, whether as a donor or for a grant. There's just so much kind of nuance there. And it's a very kind of inside baseball. If you know people in it and you're inside of it, then you can maneuver within it. If you're looking in from the outside and you don't have a guide of any sort, an unfunded list, so to speak, like it can be very not only intimidating, but just impossible to get into. You have a great idea, but how do you get it in front of the right people without knowing who those people are? I think that's, changing to some extent. I think it's opening up a lot. A lot of funders are accepting applications or looking at donors, from these different areas, but it's still a very restricted space for someone to just feel like they can break into. Especially some of the folks that we work with, even a lot of the folks from domestic organizations that are just from like Appalachia, right? And just kind of figuring out, where do I go to get funding? How do I talk about it? I always give the example when I was at George Washington, we were writing grants for cancer research. We called our patients, survivors, in remission. Like there were any number of words that we could use that would describe the same person. And when we were applying to funders or talking to donors, we had to know what word did they use. Because if we use the wrong word, they're going to think we're not talking about the same people. So we have to make sure we know the word they use to talk about this person so that we are all talking about the same person who has been diagnosed with cancer and potentially is undergoing treatment or is in remission. But if you don't use the right word, you may not be considered because you're not, in the same game.
I remember once I was working on a program where we were working with youth, and the youth were engaged. So I applied for a grant for youth engagement grant. And I remember the program officer there told me that like what we did was not youth engagement. And I was just like, you don't get to decide
What's engagement?
what these words mean. Like I have engaged these youth.
Right.
They for their grant making, I understand where he was coming from kind of, because for his grant making purposes, they had come up with a very narrow definition of youth engagement. And he could have said to me, right, well, we're looking to fund different types of youth engagement. But he said it like I wasn't engaging youth because it didn't check the right boxes on his form. And that's just I think about that a lot all the time when I'm talking to these folks, and they're like, well, how do I get these grants? I'm like, it's hard. You know, I thought I was a really good fit for that particular funder because we were, in fact, right. I thought we were doing youth engagement, but
it's why we have the Unfunded List dictionary, because we have very specific words and meanings for those words.
So what sort of processes in philanthropy do you favor? Like, do you think folks should be accepting proposals? Should they do their own research, find grantees? What should they be matched? What should they be doing?
Oh, jinkies. Slightly cop-out answer. I think it depends, right? I mean, if you have a large foundation that has the infrastructure to accept anything from anyone, then you could accept applications just, online from anyone who wants to submit. And while I'm not saying that a small, maybe family foundation shouldn't accept those, I recognize that logistically it may be more complicated and they may not be able to accept all of those and actually get through them in a timely manner. So I really think that each funder can look at it and see how are they going to be able to actually have, again, the greatest impact with their funding and the process. I do like the LOI process, just generally. I do wish that some of them...
If someone submits a shorter letter of interest before, and then based on the LOI, they're invited to submit a full proposal if the LOI matches up.
Yeah, I do like that idea. As a grant writer and as someone who's worked in grant funding, I think it saves time on both ends. It allows me, the writer, to give you the highlights of what we do for you to be able to see if it's a good fit before you have to read a 30-page proposal. On the flip side, it gives me, the funder, an opportunity to only read a couple pages without having to commit, an hour to reading a full proposal to know whether or not we're a good fit. I would like to see a slightly more robust LOI for some, though. Some of these I've filled out or I've read, and it's literally a one-page letter. And as you know, from reading many LOIs that we get through Unfunded List, the evaluators constantly have 100 questions.
Yes.
That LOI.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because this is a very common thing here. So we will review shorter LOI type submissions and longer proposals. And you're right. When there's the shorter stuff, and I hear a lot of people, when we go to funder conferences, or I see webinars online, or I'm reading articles, right? Or, we've adapted our process where the initial application form is shorter, is asking for less information, right? Well, I happen to know that reviewers hate that.
Yeah.
I see it. I'm seeing it constantly. My reviewers, every time, the shorter the proposal, when we get one-pagers to review, there's like a one-pager with images. Yeah. They're going to be there. What? They have no idea what you do. What are the programs? Where's the budget? How does, they want probably 5 to 7 pages of text explaining a program, who works there, the track record, right? It's not necessarily a template for these things, but they need real information.
Yeah.
Similar to, it's a very in-depth, from the days when people used to read magazine articles.
Oh, yeah.
Time magazine would come and you'd read a long article, right?
I still do those, so
it has to have all of the information about what we're talking about,
right?
For me to in order to be able to make decisions.
So I'd like something like in between, where I don't think it, especially for an initial request. I know it doesn't have to be a full proposal in my mind. So I do like the 2-step process, because it kind of allows you to weed out. But in that LOI, I think it has to be structured. It'd be like an actual structured LOI that contains a bare minimum of information about the history, the program, and honestly, the budget. Because the thing that drives me the craziest is when I see some of these shorter proposals, they list no number in there whatsoever. I have no idea. Is this a 50?
I have evaluators where if it doesn't have we have evaluators where if it doesn't have a budget and we assign it to them, they say I can't review this, doesn't have a budget.
No.
And I find that weird. Like I can just review it without the budget.
Yeah.
And I tell you what questions I would have about the budget, but they'll say I would have no way of evaluating this without being able to look.
I can, but one of the first things I almost always will tell the folks when I get online to do a call, and if they didn't have a budget included, or at least a budget number, like our annual budget revenue is X, that somewhere they should weave that in, because it gives me a concept. Am I looking at an organization that has, $50 million capacity, and therefore I'm reading this with that lens in terms of what they're doing and the writing? Is this an organization that has $5,000 capacity, and this is their first time out of the gate to write something? I'm going to have a different lens that I use. So I would like to see that as my LOA.
This has been a great interview. I'm glad we finally got you to sit down.
Me too.
On our respective porches. We're about to go into some bonus content for folks who've listened all the way in. These last few questions, hopefully we're going to turn them into shorts and also share them individually. All right, we're going to, I've got just 4 more questions for you about Unfunded List and what you do with us here.
Love it.
That's the nonprofit I founded.
Is it?
You've helped with the paperwork and many other things.
Is that what I'm doing here? Oh,
yep.
Okay, cool.
501c3. And so we are going to, in addition to the full interview on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, we are going to hopefully have these 4 things just as individual shorts as well. And without further ado, how and why did you get involved with Unfunded List?
I got involved with Unfunded List back in 2016, so 8 years ago. I was honestly just looking for some place to volunteer. I like to have a lot of projects going, and I was Googling online. I mentioned, stepping off the board of Street Sense, and I had a couple other projects going, but I wanted something new, kind of more in the nonprofit management philanthropic space. I actually found an ad that you had posted on Idealist for a project manager. And I remember emailing you saying, I don't want this job, but I think the organization sounds really cool. I would love to learn more about it. So I remember,
I don't think we hired.
I don't think so. We met for coffee, and for the next several months after that, I copied and pasted hours upon hours of feedback from whatever format people sent it into Canva. I remember moving those little lines up and down. They just had to be perfect in between every piece of feedback.
Was I forwarding you like emails from them? Mm-hmm. Then you put it into
their feedback report on Canva. And
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
It all happens automatically now. It's a much more rewarding service, hopefully.
Yes, no, it's amazing. I mean, the first time we were able to automate the feedback reports, it was just, it was literally magic, because those had spent.
They have magic links and everything.
Like probably 3 hours.
You don't need a login or a password.
Yeah. So I started. That's how I started with you.
Speaking of magic and magic links, we send magic links to our evaluators. I think the program, in addition to you and I, who do a lot of work, the evaluators are why we're able to give feedback to grant proposals. And over 1,000 folks have participated since 2015. Last round, specifically, 160 professionals from all over the world. I'm not sure how many countries they're from. 160 professionals volunteered with us to produce exactly 600 total reviews. The exact number was 600 reviews. Just this week, 5 new members have filled out the form to join the committee to review again, which is pretty much the weekly average. We get about 5 a week.
Yep.
Why do you think people enjoy reviewing grant proposals with us as volunteers?
Sure. Well, for me, what I enjoy doing as an evaluator is I love learning about all the issues that are out there. Every time I read a proposal, I learn about a problem that I didn't know existed. I mean, some of them I knew existed, but there's so many other times where I'm like, I didn't even know this was a thing. More, but I learn about the problem at the same time that I learn about someone who's trying to fix it, which is just super inspiring to me. I've been able to have a lot of conversations with our evaluators over the years, because a lot of them also submit proposals to us. We've done a lot of evaluator trainings, and They come from all walks of life. Some of them are grant writers themselves. A lot of them work for organizations that would be submitting to us. Some of them are funders. And I think for a lot of them, they get to see what other people are doing, and they learn. So every time they read one, they can learn a little bit about how to do their job better as a grant writer. They also get to learn again about issues. And they really get to feel part of a community as well, because I think I talked to a lot of them, and they can see that other organizations might be working on similar issues. Some partnerships have developed when an evaluator has read a proposal and said, I love this. I want to work more on this. And so I love it when they come back and they say, you sent me proposals that are exactly what I love to read. I learned about a field I'm interested in. I was able to learn more about the field of philanthropy. And now I'm even doing more work that I love because either of a collaboration or because of feedback I gave or whatever it is. So I think it's a lot of reasons why they enjoy evaluating. But those are just a couple.
Well, we did a session a few years ago with Sarah and Diane Leonard.
Oh, yeah.
They were talking about so they mentioned there was Mr. Rogers' quote about look to the helpers, right? You sort of mentioned like we learn about all of the, and I think we've talked about that before. We learn about all the problems that there are in the world, and I'm sure we'll learn about new problems.
It's not like one of my
We're not going to run about like I guess that isn't. If you're out there and you think there's a shortage of problems in the world, and you're looking to be proven wrong.
Yep.
Like the Unfunded List Evaluation Committee is for you. But that would not, and obviously that's not. Well, I don't think anybody joins because they want to learn about new problems.
No, but
what's neat about we learn about these new problems at the same time. And this, if you were doing a news story about a new problem, you would want to show what was being done about it, right? And this is what they were saying, that this is a very actionable way to respond to what they see on the news every day.
Yeah,
right. If they are in some way down about human suffering, they can. We've made it a very easy action step to take that could potentially alleviate some human suffering.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think it's a really unique way to give back. That's one of my big things is finding ways to give back. One of my favorite songs I grew up with was Mahalia Jackson's "If I Can Help Somebody." And so I think, this is one of those small.
It's a very Methodist song. It's very Methodist.
Very, very powerful woman.
So you are the only person in history who has been the board chair of both Street Sense and Unfunded List. Congratulations.
Thank you. We should tell Brian about that. He'll be excited.
I know him. We reviewed I just remember we reviewed their proposal too.
We ever did.
Neat. I know that mostly from, I used to get the paper from what do they call the vendors?
Vendors. Yep.
So you are the board chair for Unfunded List. And as you know, we are currently looking for more members. Yeah. People who are listening right now, if they think they have skills to help us, they could join Margaret.
Yes.
Serve on the board and provide oversight to yours truly.
Oh.
Why should someone join? They're joining in the evaluation committee without the 5 that have joined this week. I didn't ask them. I haven't actually asked in an email for a long time for anybody to join the committee.
That's true.
That's coming up, folks. Probably by the time you hear this, that email will be in your inbox. But why should folks who want to do more to help us out, why should they join the board?
Sure. So we have a lot of ways that you can get involved in Unfunded List besides just evaluating. We have the board. We also have a lot of committees that we work on that are run by board members. And I think if you're looking for that extra step more, so you've evaluated for a little while or you're intrigued by it, and you would actually like to help shape some of the work that we do, right? Whether it's some of the content that we create or some of the programs that we launch, maybe some of the direction of how we go about doing the evaluations. There's actually just a lot of ways you can be involved to help Unfunded List kind of go to that next level. And we'd love to have you as a board member if you want to come join us. Besides just getting to work with me or Dave, which honestly, pretty big highlight right there.
It's the only opportunity to work with me. I don't work anywhere else.
It's true. So, but it actually is an opportunity.
You can work with Margaret if you want. You hire Jam Strategies and you keep Unfunded List out of it. But if you want to provide oversight to me, this is your only opportunity. Many
that's
people out there who are
actually-
frustrated by that. They think I lack oversight.
So if you think that Dave lacks oversight, you should come join us on the board. That really should be your motivating factor. But actually, we do help kind of set the vision for what Unfunded List does every year. We do some fundraising. We do the evaluations. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for Unfunded List to grow. So you can be a part of what all is coming next with some of the co-review partnerships, which we haven't gone to talk about a whole lot. But co-review partnerships, you can be on the forefront of us working with organizations around the world to provide that philanthropic education and grant review.
Yes, we are currently partnered with Kuja, which is an international platform for international aid organizations. That's how I met the Zambians. We've had proposals from all over Africa, Latin America. We had a Ukrainian proposal, and we'll have a lot more of those sorts of proposals thanks to our ongoing partnership with Kuja. Also reviewing with the Dental Trade Alliance Foundation. So we will be reviewing oral healthcare community organizations raising money for oral health. I was practicing saying rural oral health the other day.
Oral health.
Rural oral health. Oral healthcare in the rural areas.
I like it. Rural oral health. Yeah.
Rural,
now that's a good theater warm up.
Yes.
That's a good one.
And the Next Gen Giving Circle is doing a giving cycle in DC for organizations focused on economic justice, I believe, and perhaps some other justice issues. And so we'll have local DC orgs fighting the good fight. We're gonna have some tooth organizations trying to keep our smiles looking good. And international proposals. So no matter your interests, we're going to have cool stuff for you to join. And I think, and we hope to expand our suite of co-review partnerships so we can have we can help more grant makers, get more proposals, and be doing more stuff. And I think you're right. That's a great way for board members to help, and they have been with that.
Yep.
When it comes to Unfunded List, what are you most excited about?
I think there's a lot of opportunity with co-review partnerships. I think that is one area where we've kind of branched out. We have had a couple over the years that have been great testing grounds for a process. And we've actually been able to kind of refine what that looks like a little bit, learn a lot of lessons on how to improve it. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity down the road for growing co-review with any number of different types of funders, family foundations, large funders, smaller funders. Like I think that's one of the things that most excites me, especially this year after working with the Dental Trade Alliance and Kuja and NextGen, and in the past, all the ones we've worked with, just kind of seeing the momentum building from that, and some of the early conversations we've had with others, just where that could go, especially with some of the meetings and things that we're being involved in, and actually getting more word out there about Unfunded List. The more people know about it, I think that co-review partnership is one of the most exciting things to me.
Yes. As with all small nonprofits, marketing a big challenge. I get folks come up to me and they get like a little mean with me about it. Like, well, why have I never heard about this? Like, why have you been around for how long and I know nothing about? Like, I'm trying, lady, and we're going out where we'll be at as many conferences as we'll have us. We are doing a podcast here. Hopefully people will listen in on that. As you know, the motto for Unfunded List is listen, learn, speak, from the Latin exaudio, comperio, colloquor, which is mostly from an episode of Sports Night that I really liked as a kid. It's a great quote. I think the thing I'm most excited about is the learning, because we listen here, we learn, and we get a chance to speak. Yep. Right, so you listen, you read the grant proposal, right? You learn from it, right? And then you've learned from out in the world, and we also speak back to those folks, and we have our discussions and everything. The learning has just been fantastic since we're doing this. We get to learn from folks all over the world, not just from the authors, but we get to read what smart people think about their proposals, and then talk over those comments with them. We get to learn from our funding friends. Kuja is trying to direct more funding directly to local organizations when it comes to international aid, which is very important work. Oral healthcare funding in the U.S. is kind of a mess. Everybody listening probably has teeth, so they probably know a little bit about that. But like it's and I've been able to learn, and we're going to continue. Like when we read these proposals, we're going to learn a lot about what rural communities are doing to increase oral health care, what folks are doing for veterans, right? What folks are doing for the disabled, right? Again, it's what's neat about teeth is everybody, like, it's not
got him.
Some issues don't necessarily affect everybody, but this one's gonna probably need oral health care. Right? And so I think that continuing to form those partnerships and continuing to learn from all of the people involved in this is what I'm most excited about. And I, besides the obvious, working with Margaret and David. Speaking of which, thank you very much, David Jaffe.
Thank you, David.
Finally recorded podcast. Thank you very much to everybody at home for listening. Thank you to the Unfunded for sending your proposals and to the evaluators for reading them. Thank you to my neighbors for being quiet and letting me so I could record this out on the porch today with my board chair, Margaret Chapman. Would you like to leave the folks with some parting words?
Yeah, I would just say thanks for having me. It was so much fun to actually formally sit down and talk about all the things with you. And I very much enjoyed that we had matching backgrounds. For those who can't see, we do have matching backgrounds. And
there's trees behind us, and we're both on a porch.
Yeah, I
love short hair. Margaret has longer red hair. Mm-hmm. Is wearing a purple blouse.
Blue. Violet? It's blue, navy.
Blue.
Yeah, but in the natural light, it does have that purple.
I'm not good with blues.
Okay, it's navy. But yeah, no, it's been delightful, and I'm excited that I got to share a little bit about what inspires me to work in philanthropy and what excites me about the field and where I hope it's going, where I hope Unfunded List is going, and a little bit about what I do every day, because I know my parents don't often know what I do every day, so maybe they'll listen and they'll be like, "Oh,
this could help." Yeah, I might. That's a good idea. I might do the same. My parents like you very much, so they might actually listen. They might actually listen to this episode. This might be the first time my father's ever like, "You got an interview with Margaret. You might be proud of me." Right? At the time I played golf with the doctor. My mom wouldn't shut up about it. Thank you very much, everybody. For those of you who listened this long, you must really enjoy Unfunded List, or Margaret, or Dave, or both. Again, thank you, David Jaffe, for all the hard work you do in putting these podcasts together.
Thank you.
Very good. I assume by now the music has played us off stage. And